Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Wings Podcast. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri. On today's show, we will meet Kunal Khanna, born into the Madham in Mumbai, raised amongst the monkeys and mountains of Panchgani, and made independent in an adulthood in Australia. Kunal has returned back to his roots, running a permaculture farm and developing ALT EFF to become a catalyst for environmental change in India. While he started his career as an economist, his true passion lies in systems thinking and using that to enable paradigm shifts, which he did while working as the innovations lead at the City of Melbourne. Kunal has an undergraduate degree in economics and a master's in environment and sustainability from University of Melbourne, and currently splits his time between Melbourne and India. Welcome, Kunal, to this episode of Wings Podcast.
Hello, Milan. It's really good to be here. Thank you.
Kunal, this is a fairly rich introduction as such of yourself, which I just read out. But on the Odd Gumnut website, I read a very interesting profile of yours about you and Laura. It says, "We are the fun, adrenaline, party-loving type, spending our 20s and early 30s hopping from festival to festival, camping, hiking, paragliding, bush bashing, and committing general acts of hooliganism. All the while, we have lived intentionally, lightly and naturally, caring deeply about Bhumi Mata and all the creatures on earth. We love to ride our bicycles, travel new countries with small 10 kg backpacks, and boogie to music till our legs are sore." Now, I'm asking myself,
Absolutely.
Kunal, whom am I talking here with? Because if I were to put down a finger on Kunal as to who is Kunal, I think my 10 fingers of my hand and the 10 of my feet won't be enough.
Well, that's a very well put, Milan. I really appreciate you looking all of that up and picking it all out for this conversation because it is very appropriate and it's actually a life challenge I face very often when someone starts to ask me as to what what am I up to or who am I, and yes, there's different phases and different avatars, as you put it earlier, that we have in our lives, and I think most people do. We, both Laura and me, we follow our passion. We are not stuck to one thing. We are really wear our hearts on our sleeves, and we just go for it, really. And so we are also extremely privileged to be able to be living in two or three beautiful countries, and we have access to enjoy both the perks and the pleasures and the rich experiences that countries have to offer, and we like to think that we give back as well. And hence there is what there is in the paths that we have chosen, in the work that we do, but at the same time in the way we live our lives.
And what I really appreciated about all that is available in the public domain about you and Laura, and more about your work. I was also reading up about Oricon. Is that the firm that you are associated with right now?
Correct.
Yeah, I was reading up on Oricon, where you work as a senior consultant, helping the City of Melbourne in in achieving the vision of becoming a city which practices the circular economy concept. And we'll get to that very soon. What I'm really like what you just said now, that you are able to explore and enjoy all that you are and you can be, and make it into a coherent whole, and create value for yourself and others.
Totally. No, I think absolutely. And, just in terms on that is that, as myself, I have shifted careers and I have moved into different subject matters. And often these are not things that I maybe directly, educated in or gotten a professional a degree or a diploma in, but these are things that I truly, genuinely find interesting and have developed a form or some sort of a passion towards. And one thing that has remained consistent for me is if I find that passion, if I find that true interest deep within about it, I haven't stopped back from really plunging into it with everything I got and really seeing where that takes me. And I think henceforth, this curly-cued journey that I've had with both my professional life and my personal life in the places that we spend our time in, and the things, people, ideas, and projects that we interact with in our day-to-day and have in over the last 10, 15 years.
Let's pick on one very interesting, dream of yours that you are pursuing, which is curating some amazing documentary films made across the world on the subject of saving and protecting environment. And, you started a novel film festival called ALT EFF, which I gather is an acronym for All Living Things Environmental Film Festival. And in the 2021 edition of ALT EFF, which I think was mostly online, probably because of COVID. You can tell us more about that. But I, by chance, landed up on watching previews of two short films. These are 2-minute previews. And I was like fascinated with what I saw. One was a film called Ant and Grasshopper, which is about a Malawian activist for gender equality and ending child hunger, and carrying the message of climate change and its impact on lives and livelihoods in Malawi, Africa. The other film was a short film called Sagar Putra, which depicts the oldest inhabitants of Mumbai city, the Koli fisher folk from the village of Trombe Koliwada, who are gradually moving away from the livelihood of fishing. Why? Because of the toxic plastic-filled seawater and being locked in by the government's infrastructure project on all sides, which has destroyed marine life, thus leaving the coolies with no choice but to look for alternate source of income. So you are curating some amazing living stories here. So why don't you walk us through the vision and how it got created and how ALT EFF has evolved over the years into now and probably going into the future?
Absolutely. Thanks. So, we'll go back a little bit. So in my time in Australia, I spent a lot of time going to festivals, going to cultural events. Melbourne is also known as the cultural capital of Australia, and in some ways also a very, very rich cultural city on a global scale, global sense as well. And in that time, I spent 13 years here in Melbourne, and I went to film festivals and fringe festivals and music events and comedy festivals and all of these kind of cultural melting pots that came together, that brought people together, and was really the hotspot for me to change my perspective on things in the way I knew it. I am trained as an economist, and my undergrad was in economics, and I continued to follow that career, very linear career path to going ahead and joining an organization, being economic advisor, and so on. But it was these festivals and these films and these experiences that I started to have in my early 20s that really allowed me to look outside of what I had just studied, what my peers told me or showed me about, or what was being discussed within the circles that I was always limited to. And that really led me to kind of give some other ideologies a chance, go and travel around the world for an extended period of 18 months, really expose myself to a whole range of issues and experiences at its ground level with different kinds of people all over the place. So, and that really led to me, environment becoming a really strong focus for me, and then me determining that this is what I want to dedicate my life to, really. And this was back in 2011, in my mid-20s. And the catalyst for all of this was, these films that I was watching at these festivals that were otherwise not available anywhere else. They were not they were not coming to cinemas. They were art house alternative movies and documentaries that you get access to at only these festivals. So when fast forward a little bit, and I returned back to India in 2018, and we started our permaculture farm, we saw this groundswell of interest in people really recognizing that we are in a serious kind of crisis. We know there's a lot of stuff that is going wrong. It's right up in front center. It's blatant. We see all of these issues, but the kind of knowledge that is being decimated, or that information that is coming through from those traditional sources, was somewhat limiting. They were not so holistic. They were one-sided. They were, and they were just on the fringes still to a very large extent, unless you were actually going and studying this stuff and you're reading scientific papers or really actively going out and pursuing knowledge to get yourself more insight into these issues. So I kind of went back to my experience and I said, why not have a film festival that brings films from all over the world, sharing both the problems, but more importantly, the solutions that are out there. What are people really doing? The environmental is a global crisis, is not limited to by geography at all. And people are facing similar issues thousands of miles away. And we are all finding our own novel solutions to these problems. We are standing up against the doers of or the causes of these issues. Grassroots initiatives are rising up everywhere, and so film is an incredibly powerful medium to package this kind of information, to package these experiences, to package this knowledge, and deliver it in a very short, maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes, sometimes an hour package that is both engaging and also entertaining, that really leaves you thinking about what else is possible, what else can be done, why can't we do this over here, and not only from around the world, but also within India. India is a big place, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of things all over the place, and we are again limited to what is that we are exposed to from the accounts that we follow on social media or the news channels that we read. But there's a lot of work that is happening, incredible people doing incredible work, starting incredible movements, and there's a groundswell of things that are taking place. Only we need to open our eyes to it and film. There are filmmakers that are out there that are capturing this and putting in this really powerful medium. And so ALT EFF really seeks to become that place where it brings all of this together with film at its core, but also coupled with conversations, discussions, debates, panels, and talks, and that really engaging in experiential versions of how we consume knowledge, and also share ideas and network and build whatever we are working on and give it more traction and more force to go out there and make change. So that's kind of what the thinking behind ALT EFF is. When I was in Panchgani, I was also really fortunate to meet Neha and Rudransh, who run a design studio there, who have a background in film. I'm very passionate about these issues, but I don't have a background in film. So it was a bit of a coincidence, but it was a lovely one that we have other young, driven entrepreneurial folk in Panchgani who had this background and also felt really passionately about all of just what I just mentioned. So it was a very obvious collaboration that we kind of could make happen, and the four of us really hit the ground running and launched this festival in 2020 during COVID. And so obviously, launched it as a virtual event, which was again, it felt like it was unfortunate that it was virtual the first year, but in fact, it was a big blessing in disguise, because we were able to reach significantly large audiences that we could have with the kind of limited budgets that we had in that first year. And not only in India, we were able to reach audiences all over the world. So today, ALT EFF has audiences and attendees from 55 different countries. We have a total attendance rate of about 15,000 people to the festival last year in 2022. And we are now emerging out of that digital only to in-person as well, where last year we had screenings in 8 different cities and towns in India simultaneously over the 10-day festival period. And this year in 2023, which is the 4th year of the festival, we're aiming to have at least one screening in every state of the country. So we're looking at 30 plus screenings in India and probably about 4 or 5 internationally as well. So that launching that festival in that virtual medium actually opened our eyes once again to what else is out there? Why do we need to follow this traditional model of running this kind of organization or an enterprise or an experience? We were pushed to do something different, and now that's led into, or that was the seed to evolve this festival from being just a Panchgani located festival where people come and travel and watch the films there in a screening room in Panchgani or it's little theaterette there, to really becoming a true national and global event, where we are engaging with people where they are, and that really aligns with the mission of ALT EFF, where we want to reach the masses, we want to get to people to where they are, get this information to them, get this catalyzing, impactful stories to people wherever they are, that leads them to stand up and start making change as well. So that's a bit about where we're at with ALT EFF and what we have in the books for this year.
What I'm hearing right now, Kunal, is something which can keep one busy for lifetime. Yet, in all this making of ALT EFF into a reality, in the scale and the size and the richness that it is today, what we have just heard from you, in all this, you find another passion or calling to bite the odd gum nut. What's that story?
Yep, absolutely. So in terms of the chronology of things, Milind, so the odd gum nut came before ALT EFF.
Okay.
And we came back to India, and we got started in Panchgani with our little 1.5 acre property, which was basically completely degenerated. It was just a wasteland, essentially. It was completely eroded, and all that was growing there was rocks.
Sorry, just a bit of interruption here. When you say we came back, who is we?
Myself and Laura, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
So when we moved back to India, Laura and I, who's my wife, from Australia in 2018, we went to Panchgani. This is where I grew up, in a boarding school. We went back there, and we went there actually, back me, and for the first time for Laura, and we had some land there, and we started the Odd Gumnut Permaculture Farm. And at this stage, both Laura and I had been quite deeply exposed to the idea of permaculture. Laura, we both done our permaculture courses, and we were really interested and curious and feeling the strong passion about permaculture and what we can do with it, and how the mindset, the ideology, its core principles in the way we start to look at the world with the permaculture lens on was incredibly inspiring. And that was essentially the reason why we moved back, because we wanted to, we were both working in professional jobs here. That was my job, was working for the city, really exciting, but at the same time, we really wanted to get back to the soil, get connected to the land, and really get our hands dirty, and just kind of really put this permaculture thinking and the learnings that we've had into practice, and see where that can take us and how we can really live this dreamy, and is it really realistic or not? That was a big question. So we gave everything up, and we moved back to India, got this land in Panchgani, and we started the farm. And whilst we started as a permaculture farm, we always have to think about, how do we obtain a yield? One of the main principles of permaculture is to obtain a yield, and we identified, and really easy to know, that Panchgani is a big tourist hub. So given the resources that we have, and the fact that we are located in Panchgani, we created Odd Gumnut, or we position Odd Gumnut as a place for learning and education. We have close to 2 million visitors who visit Panchgani and Mahabaleshwar every year. And so we wanted to be that place, which is an alternative experience for people to come, learn about agriculture, learn about natural living, learn about regenerative farming, learn about all the harmful impacts of the harmful things that are in our food that we eat every day, how important it is for us to work with our soil and the microbes and the and bacteria, and how important is the ecology of the soil, and all of those kind of thinking, and how we can really mimic these patterns in nature to really make land more productive. We don't have to be doing things in a conventional way, even though that is something that we've been sold. How can we realign to our ancient ways, which, for us in India, luckily, it's actually not that far back that we were already doing everything correct. So we really wanted to create a space which allowed people to come there and see all of this again. Give in our urban lives and living in the cities, we're just so busy, and things that we carry on, and we do the things that society tells us to do and what we presume is right to do. We wanted to create the space for people to come, be out of their normal or their usual surroundings, and kind of provide an opportunity and space to open their mind back to this kind of learning. And hence we started the Odd Governor. We started offering a whole range of tours, a whole range of workshops, everything from making your natural products to your body products, to your cleaning products, to better handling your food and storing your food, fermentation, making sourdough bread, making kombucha, and then also like the things like farm tour and hands-on experiences on the farm, growing stuff and planting seeds, starting seedlings from seeds, fertilizing, creating your own compost, managing your waste, creating circular systems, and all of these kind of things. So that was what Odd Governor became, and that's how we started off as in 2018, 2019. Unfortunately, we know what happened in 2020, and so all of this visitor economy that was coming to Panchgani went away. We kind of completely lost that key business model, if you will, what we'd created around this really dreamy lifestyle that we were also creating. And so we had to rethink that. So we obviously, like everyone else, we went on to delivering all of these things online, and we created an online course, which is on Udemy. It's called the Odd Governor's Guide to Radical Self-Reliance, and it gives you all the knowledge and information you need to pretty much break away from the system that we are dependent on in our day-to-day. That course will teach you everything you can to make your own stuff. And yeah, so we moved online to all of that, and then when COVID passed, we've kind of back to the farm and visitors. We're doing experiences and 3-day long workshops and residencies and so on and so forth. So Laura really is the main head of the Odd Governor. Once I launched ALT EFF, I work with Laura quite closely, but Laura really is the CEO, if you will, of the Odd Governor, and I'm basically more involved in ALT EFF. But we both support each other very integrally for both of these projects. And yeah, the third thing that I'll mention quickly here as well, we do have a little kombucha company called the Rise Up Kombucha, and that really became also a mainstay for our business model around how we could sustain living and running and growing on this farm while also having some revenue coming in. And so that is also doing really well, and we sell kombucha to Mumbai and Pune, and locally in Panchgani, Mahabaleshwar. And so between all of these things, we are at a stage where we do have a bit of a team that help us, and incredible set of humans that make it all possible with our guidance and support as well. So yeah, there are these multiple things, but if you start to notice that thread that is coming along, it's all around awakening and providing people the opportunity to unlearn, if you will, what we have learned, or relearn things that we might have forgotten, and really kind of engaging back with the natural systems that we are part of, and awareness and knowledge being at the central place of all of that. And through all of these enterprises, that's really what we're trying to drive forward.
Now, permaculture, my original encounter with the word was just a few years back, probably 2 or 3. And my reading then told me that it was an acronym that came from permanent agriculture, but which over a period of time, it has become rephrased as permanent culture, as a way of living, where the goal is to do, take what is your fair share from Mother Earth and return it back to her in a way that Mother Earth is regenerated. Because this regeneration principle, I was, as a student of systems thinking and a practitioner of that science in the work that I do in organization development, I think it's so very important. I mean, if I go back to the Sagar Putra short film from the ALT EFF 2021 edition, where the poor fishermen lives and livelihood are destroyed because of the end of marine life. Thanks to the toxic waste that gets dumped into the seas, not just here in Mumbai city or India, I guess anywhere in the world. So what I have learned myself as a student of systems thinking is there is this regeneration capacity of every system. There's a life. As long as you are consuming equal or less than the regeneration capacity of the system, then the system continues to give. The cycle goes in perpetuity. Like, for example, look at the overfishing that happens in most seas across the world for the human desire to have more and more. I mean, the glamour that has been associated with oysters somehow tells me that it is destroying a whole lot of oysters that are getting, created by the oceans of the world. And we as human beings are consuming far more than what is getting produced. Obviously, it's going to dry off and run off someday. So it's not just that. I mean, this take, make, and waste thinking that somehow has gripped the human psyche, just about in every aspect of life, whether you take minerals, whether you take soil, whether you take, the oxygen that we take for granted from the trees. As an economist and an environmentalist, how do you look at this phenomena of this incessant drive of human species of taking, making, and wasting? Where, I mean, the end is what we can see for sure, but then through your ALT EFF and through your odd gumnut and a whole lot of other things that you're doing with the City of Melbourne, this whole concept of circular economy, which you have, which also is core to you, Kunal, how important do you think is this for the times that we live today?
Totally. And, once again, it kind of really does come back to, it really well connects with all the other things, and being circular inherently is really the nature of it. But I would say that regeneration, the concept that you touched upon, is of utmost importance today. We live in this world where we all aspire to have a certain standard of life. We all aspire to get some level of comfort. We all aspire to have a certain standard that we want to have in the way we live our life. And we don't want to deny or take that away from anyone. And that is really the human psyche that has been built into all of us. And it's truly so a right one. However, it is the systems that create this and that support the things, if you will, or the material, if you really bring it back down, is what that we're using, the way we are treating it is where the problem is. And very often we've also heard that plastic is not the problem. The way we manage plastic is the problem. Plastic is a great invention. The way we manage it and deal with it is the problem. And that really goes for everything. This take, make, waste, or the linear economy is also what it's known as, is what we have made it so economic growth, which is a key indicator across the world at all levels, a key indicator of success, and what governments, big and small companies, we are all aiming to economic growth and GDP. Unfortunately, it's a very simplified version in the way we measure success, but that is what it is. Where it is at now in the world we live in is that GDP is strongly coupled with material use and extraction. And where we take things, we extract, we use all of these raw materials to make things, people consume it, we buy it, and then we, at the end of its life, we throw it away and we go buy new, and that leads to more consumption and more taking. Now, circular economy turns that on its head and says that we already have enough materials out there in circulation. It's about how we can continue to use that in perpetuity without extracting more. Very simply put, without extracting more. So we can, and in that, we can continue to grow economically. We can continue to get that kind of growth, standard of living, improved lifestyles. We've had the most number of people come out of poverty in the last 50 years than ever before. And all of those things are really good. These indicators of lifestyle and hunger and all of this, that we are also solving very important world issues, but we're heavily dependent on extracting new materials from planet Earth, which is very destructive to all the other ecosystems and all other life on Earth except for ourselves. So circular economy is saying that we need to decouple growth with that. We can continue to use or mine, if you will, urban mine materials or use systems of sharing and repairing and other ways, and we can keep materials in use in perpetuity and still continue to have that standard of living. And that's really what circular economy is all about. There's three key principles: is to eliminate waste and pollution completely. The whole idea and concept of waste does not need to exist. And this really easily ties back into permaculture, because one of the key principles in permaculture is waste is resource. And that's exactly what circular economy is all about. Waste is just another resource. It's not waste. We want to circulate products forever, and we want to keep these materials at its highest value rather than making a lower and lower and lower value, eventually becoming again a waste stream. We want to maintain it at a very high value for as indefinitely, ideally. And the third main principle for circular economy is about regeneration, which is to regenerate nature. And that very well ties back into permaculture as well, where we want to apply self-regulation. We want to accept feedback from the things that we're doing. We don't want to just constantly keep taking and taking and taking without regulating how much we need and how we are interacting with the sources where we're extracting from. And we want to value renewable resources and services as well. And that's of utmost priority in permaculture. We want to capture the energy. We want to keep the energy in use. We want to slow down the flow of that energy. And all of that allows us to get more yields from that same amount of energy rather than just one time and then throwing it away, which is in the linear economy. So I'm trying to draw these parallels between the way a permaculturist thinks and in the way circular economy is now being positioned and becoming such an important part and parcel of how we are addressing the sustainability issue. They're very much, they're very closely aligned with each other, and circular economy is something that is getting taken on by organizations and governments and corporations and big manufacturers and all of them. And these principles, how can we translate that into real actions? How can we translate them into real design methodologies, into real approaches that in the ways we design things and the way we design these systems and economies and the way we design our consumption in this circular way, so that we can really decouple our growth and success from just being extractive. So, I mean, it's all kind of quite, for me personally, it's all very much closely interlinked, and hence it might seem on the outset that these are very, that I'm doing too much, but really the hat that I'm wearing is the same one in doing all of these different things.
Kunal, just like you, I'm also a student, a perpetual student on the subject of systems thinking. Since the time I got introduced to it, I think almost 2 decades back. Again, the reason it resonated with me is also probably the kind of a person that I am.
Yeah.
I've had many teachers on this subject. Most of them are the ones whom I've never met. I'll probably never meet again, ever in my life. One such person is Dr. Russell Ackoff, an American professor and considered to be a pioneer in the field of operations research and systems thinking. And there is a beautiful, beautiful video of one of his talks on YouTube. I think it's called Systems Thinking Speech by Dr. Russell Ackoff. Now, for our conversation today, I have picked up 2 lines of his from that speech of his, which I think is an hour and 10 minutes long. Let me read what Dr. Ackoff said in his speech. 2 lines. 1, a system is a whole that contains 2 or more parts, each of which can affect the properties or behavior of the whole. None of them has an independent effect on the whole. How any part affects the whole depends on what other parts are doing. And the other statement is, changes in the field are never produced by experts within, but by outsiders looking at the field. Unquote. So, as a systems thinker and as a practitioner of circular economy, how do you see these principles manifesting in the work that you do, let's say as a consultant with the City of Melbourne today?
Yeah, totally, Milan. And thanks for sharing those two quotes. That really, paints a really nice perspective on how system thinking can be thought about. I'd pick up a very good and specific example, which is an excellent example of systems thinking being applied, and that is there was an open innovation competition that I helped set up and developed at the City of Melbourne a few years ago. This basically looks at the whole city and the people who interact and call the city home, and the knowledge that flows in the city, and how we can use this and capitalize on it and build it to solve city problems. Traditionally, a local government might look at, okay, here's an issue, and we need to come up with a solution, and we need to put some money, and we will solve it, and we will create a new footpath, or we'll solve the issue of potholes, or we can and so on and so forth. So however, when you start to recognize that the city government itself is part of a greater and wider system, which when you look and as a whole, the government is an important integral part, but still only a, a part, but not the whole. And so when you start to think about problems and the wider community and all the parts together in the system to to solve issues, we wanted to do that. We wanted to put that kind of mindset in solving urban issues and city issues. And so this open innovation competition essentially puts out a challenge in the community every year. And on that challenge, through a bunch of support and mentoring, it's a open call for anyone and everyone, startups and businesses and students and residents and big and small consultancies can all submit solutions to this particular problem. It's truly a competition. So there's pitch nights, and there's a lot of support that gets provided to the winner, and there's prizes and cash and so on and so forth, incubation. But what really happens is the city is enabling the solving of the problem versus solving the problem themselves. What you end up with is a much more rich, cohesive, very interlinked solution that is ought to work. And so an example of this, when this innovation competition has now been going for close to 6 or 7 years since we set it up, and we've had a whole range of issues that have gone through it. There's been one around accessibility and how we can make city more accessible, and then there's been one on circular economy itself. And what that did was really put in the minds of the Melbourne community and publicly going out there and saying this is an issue that we're going to take seriously and we want to make the city more circular. It really started to bring a whole range of ideas, a whole range of people actively pursuing this very serious challenge that we all face all around the world around waste. So there's a problem around organic waste where businesses, restaurants, hotels, residents, and households are producing organic waste in their day-to-day. But right now, this is going straight to landfill. The City of Melbourne has committed to reducing or becoming a zero landfill city in a decade's time or so. And so in doing that, we wanted to find the solutions out there and get people thinking about the solutions. Not all the solutions will win, but once people start thinking about it, these all start to interact with each other to create a whole paradigm where we are starting to look at the world through this circular lens. And so one specific example that now is doing is, I would say, is a very big success story of circular economy in Melbourne is this idea of soldier flies eating food waste to produce larvae, which can then get reused as animal or pet food or fertilizer. So let me explain to you a little bit more. There's a company here called Bardi who collects food waste from restaurants, from commercial operations, and they have this operation in the city of Melbourne where they're feeding all of this to a whole army of soldier flies. They eat this food waste, they produce this larvae, and this larvae can now be sold as a higher value product to pet owners who can then feed this really rich protein to their pets. But then also the residue of these soldier flies living their life, the fertilizer or the droppings that come out can then be applied in agriculture and farms to fertilize the soil. So not only are we taking, this is a very distinct example of what a circular economy can be versus a higher value circular economy versus just reducing the value of the product. So if you just take food waste and turn it into compost, sure, that compost is going back into the soil and adding value to the soil and it's regenerating the soil. But by doing this with the soldier fly larvae, we are turning something that was of very, very low value into 3 commercial products that are being now sold for significantly larger value than what that food waste was all about. And this is what I was talking to earlier, where a true circular economy not only takes waste and turns it and recycles it into something that's usable, but takes waste and turns it into something that is higher value than the waste itself.
As we are approaching the end of this conversation, which sadly I have to say that because we are in a podcast format, would love to have this conversation going on for hours with you. Each of these topics is a podcast conversation in itself with you, Kunal. But, I'm also a student of mythology, just as I'm a student of, natural sciences and social sciences. And mythology, of course, being an Indian, and in India, you can't separate mythology from any Indian, literate or illiterate, from any socio-economic strata. We all have grown up reading and listening stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana and Krishna and so on and so forth. So, as I was listening to what you have said over the last, half an hour or a little more than that we have been talking, I'm reminded about the story of Lord Brahma, who in the Indian mythology is said to be the creator of the universe. And in the beginning, the story goes, which is what I have been told, is Lord Brahma created the Devas and the Asuras, which is the gods and the evils, as you might want to call them. And he bestowed a unique power in both the gods and the Asuras or the Rakshasas of having the ability to take any form and appear at any time and any place. So, for example, Shurpankha in Ramayana, who is the sister of Ravan, who's a Rakshasa by herself. She's very ugly, but then she takes the form of a beautiful, beautiful woman and tries to seduce Lord Ram, and that's where the whole story begins, etc. Or Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, appearing as a fish or as a boar, in the Dashavatar story that we all have grown up with. Now, this mythology of having the ability to take any form and any shape and appear at any place at any time, not just appears in this part of the world in India, it appears in every mythology, is what I have read, having followed Joseph Campbell's work in comparative mythology. That whether it is Native Americans or Canadians or South Americans or, Aborigines in Australia or in Japan or much of Southeast Asia, all these characters called shapeshifters appear in some form or the other. I mean, the shapeshifter actually in mythology is considered as an archetype, which has the ability to become what it wants to become in terms of form and function, and choose a time and place of its calling and manifest itself, only to move on to shift the shape again. I think the conversation that you and I are having is leading me to a feeling that I am actually talking to a shapeshifter right now, who who born in Mumbai, grew up amongst the monkeys and mountains in Panchgani, goes to Australia to do his economics and environmental sciences, finds a young, beautiful girl who he falls in love with whom he goes around doing hooliganism, as he says, and dance till their feet turn sore. And the two of them create this amazing venture called the Odd Gumnut in permaculture. And while that is happening, the shapeshifter goes and makes another commitment in the cause of environment protection in the form of curating of films and running now a film festival which is global in nature with tens of thousands of viewers over the years, in the fourth year right now, and yet engaging in some very practical and pragmatic problems for an urban city like Melbourne. How do you see the shapeshifter here, if at all you had a sense of that yourself?
Oh, Milind, I'm honored that you said this, and really nicely described. And I have not really thought about myself in those terms. But like I said earlier in our chat, and thanks for having me on the show today. And I must say that I'm feel very fortunate that I could identify really early on what I'm truly passionate about, and not in a subject matter or a skill way, but more so in this mindset and approach way, and kind of really determining and kind of sticking to always, or as much as I can, no one's perfect, but as much as I can, to kind of having that mindset to everything I do. And I think, one of the things I would say, which I really live by, is that anything is truly possible if you put your mind to it. And it's something that I believe in it very strongly, and that has really allowed me to not shy away from something that might feel quite overwhelming or quite significant, or just the feeling of doing too much. And I think that those mindsets, and along with that, the skills around technical skills around permaculture, and the experiences and the knowledge and the power of the network and system that we can use to support ourselves and build on, is what I really have been able to rely on, and it has given back. And all I can say is that I feel really honored and fortunate to be able to do it. And I think this is hopefully just the start, and there's a lot more to come. And this film festival, I really hope, will continue to go on for decades. And there's just so much energy behind it, and there's so many people who are really resonating with it. And if not, it may not be me at the helm anymore in some time, and there might be others who will take this forward in different shapes and forms. And that's what it is truly being designed to do. And I think if we can do that with everything that we take up, where we allow others to take it on and give it their own energy and form, and shift the shape of that thing in their own way to make it relevant to the times that it exists in, that illusion and the capability and baking in that kind of evolution in anything we do, I think can really allow us to have longevity in the things that we are working with, or the life that we're living with, really. So I really I feel like the analogy you draw is quite it's a bit too much for me to grasp. I think it's a lit. I haven't seen myself in that sense before, but I appreciate you mentioning it. But yeah, I mean, we're doing our best, and at the core, I really realize, and I think a lot of people now do, that we are in an existential crisis, and we need to do things differently, and we need to do everything that it takes to solve these big issues that we have, not just from the perspective of progress or growth or success, but just if we truly want to continue our way of life as we see it today in 5, 10, 20 years time, because things are shifting very quickly and they will continue to. So I love to continue to hear the people you chat with, because I know that they all are shape shifting in some way or form. And I think it is these kind of platforms that you have built together, like this podcast, that can bring folk like this together and kind of learn from each other and grow from each other, and go out and do amazing things in their own lives.
The other trait of a shapeshifter that almost all mythologies in the world talk about, that the shapeshifter is an amorphous entity. It has no form of its own, and hence it can take any shape and any form and be what it wants to be, with one simple belief that I am this, that, and much more. So on that note, Kunal, all I'll say is, thank you very much for being a part of this podcast. It's been truly an honor and a joy to have this conversation. And I'm sure you will prove to yourself every day that you are this, that, and much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Milind.
Thank you for your time today, my dear listeners. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri, signing off. Goodbye, take care, and stay safe. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as a piece of any professional advice. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of its guest. Creators of this podcast expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct or indirect, consequential or other damages arising out of any individual's use of this podcast. For feedback and suggestions, please write to wingsindia75@gmail.com. Thank you.